Great morning, everyone. New week means a new set of learnings. So, who among the class in 3N will be today's reporters? So, we have here Group 4 as the host of today's presentation. So, I would like to ask everybody's attention to please listen to our presentation and enjoy watching. So, we have here the names of the reporters. Calling for an emergency meeting. We are about to start the presentation. So the topic one is comprised of analyzing strategic management cases, and that will be reported by yours truly, Jeremy Valdez. So first, let me define to you what strategic management cases are. So strategic management cases is a method of learning complex strategic management concepts. It places you in a situation and challenges you to figure out what to do. It is also defined as a detailed description of a challenging situation faced by an organization. So it increases your understanding of what managers should and should not do in guiding a business to success. Basically, it serves as a stepping stone before you become a successful manager in the making. It also hones your skills in identifying up company resource strengths and weaknesses, as well as help you gain more experiences to conduct strategic analysis in a variety of industries and competitive situations. It gets you valuable practice in identifying strategic issues that needs to be addressed, evaluated, to create an alternative and formulate implementable plans of actions. So likewise, it enhances your senses of business judgment, and it also helps you gain in-depth exposure to different industries and companies that is something close to actual business experience. So as you can see in the monitor, I have presented here three examples of brands, and I will be discussing with you examples of their cases in a real corporate world. We have here first Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder is a prestige brand of high quality cosmetics and other beauty products. This brand is famous around Western countries. Here in the Philippines, we also have this brand available, but there are only selected regions that distributes these products. Mostly, you can only find their product available at Rustan's Mall, and they only had an official online flagship store at Lazada. And Estee Lauder premieres through their marketing strategy of high touch approach, where their physical store offers different free samples for their potential customers. In addition, they have an in-store beauty advisor which customers can seek help for skin consultation and other recommendation that they can get. However, this pandemic happened. They have lost sales and store traffic because of that. Now, the case here is that how are they going to build traffic again in their physical store? Or is it still possible to implement their high touch approach to their market, and how will they do it? So next we have here an example of 7-Eleven case analysis. So 7-Eleven is one of the leading convenience stores here in the Philippines. However, due to the same reason that had occurred for Estee Lauder, 7-Eleven has lost almost 100 million because of the quarantine protocols that lasted for several months. So have you noticed that there were some branches of 7-Eleven that has closed at the beginning of the quarantine and has remained closed up to this day? Last June 2020, 7-Eleven decided to close almost 10% of their branches due to the incurring financial difficulties caused by this pandemic. So in July, they reopened 5% of their store, which makes 5% left of their store possible for permanent shutdown. Yes, it might have been that the branches that you have seen closed for months will be shut down permanently. So the case here is that what could 7-Eleven possibly do to survive this battle where physical stores are not as prioritized as today? Considering that people are now in their comforts of their home and now rely to online deliveries and such. Now, heading off, Maybank has planned to introduce an online banking called Maybank to You to target college students to open savings account and convenience for all. The problem is that How are they going to promote and communicate their new mobile application to all of their potential customers with a wise and effective spending? So why is it important for us to know how to analyze strategic management cases? So as a manager or business practitioners, we need to acquire or develop certain abilities and skills because we are highly involved with the company's internal or external matters. We have the authority to grant decisions for the whole company welfare, which means that we are obliged and accountable to whatever outcomes will occur. One of the main reasons to analyze strategic management cases is to develop an ability to evaluate business situations critically. In case analysis, memorizing key terms and conceptual frameworks is not enough. To analyze a case, it is important that you go beyond textbook prescriptions and quick answers. So we have here skills that are required for an effective strategic case analysis. So people or decision makers should know how to differentiate. There are many different elements in a situation that must be evaluated at once. We need to differentiate factors that are influencing the situation and understand the problems that are often complex. So we need to know how to distinguish things from each other, isolate certain points according to their category so that you will not be confused when analyzing things. Likewise, try to set the factors influencing the situation separately so that you can have a wider and organized perspective of evaluating the situation. You also need to check where your problems are rooting from, or are these problems caused internally or externally? Does these things have something to do with threats from competition or environment? As possible, we need to become meticulously observant with all the controversial factors that involves the operation of our business. We need to filter out information in the case, just like for example, we need to take the main problem that the situation projects, then identify the supporting details that leads you to your main problem, differentiate advantages and disadvantages that your company has to its competitors, and so forth. So next, we need to learn how to speculate. So we need to imagine different scenarios or contemplate the outcome of a decision to aid the analysis. Form a theory. Even if we need to deal with uncertainties due to the insufficiency of information, we need to practice extending our minds with all the possibility that the situation has. Dealing with outcomes also deals with uncertainties. That's why, as a manager or business student, we need to develop our ability to speculate so that even if we need to deal with all the uncertainties that circumstances have, we'll be able to overcome them. So next is integrating. Have an organization-wide perspective and integrate the impact of various decision and environmental influences on all parts of the organization. Integrating is like connecting the dots. When analyzing cases, we need to identify the relationship of certain pieces. We need to see how things are connected with each other and find which part did things fell ineffectively. I believe that it will make you decipher the important aspects that you need not to miss out when examining. Furthermore, as a man as or furthermore, as a managers or business practitioners, we need to understand how various factors influences the organization's operation and interaction. If we have discussed differentiating things a while ago, this time we need to integrate the missing pieces or put them in an order that will make you see things where they are coming from. It's just like how we connect stories to make things clearer and understand them, which in relation to case studies where we need to stitch things to become whole. Important things to keep in mind before conducting case analysis. Before jumping out into conclusions, an effective manager doesn't just create solution. They follow certain steps that will help them be successful in strategizing. So what do they really do? They take homework. They crucially investigate every single detail that a situation has, then analyzes how things have come up to this or how things are interrelated to each other and to the situation. They research possible solutions that are highly based from facts and data gathered. They also take advices from people, and that is referred to as backyard information that will also help support the things that may have caused this situation. So next we have here is one of the important things to keep in mind before conducting case analysis, placing yourself inside the case. Think like an actual participant in the case situation. So you need to feel that you are presently involved with the situation. Feel like someone who is actually facing a problem and is finding how things will be settled into places. So put yourself into various point of views and opinions, then ask yourself, have I already known how different people think? Then now, after identifying, you will have the sensitivity to create an integrated idea, avoiding an insensitive and single perspective output to happen. So aside from that, if we start putting ourselves into the problem, we will be able to understand where such things are coming from. Strategic case analysis requires an in-depth study, and we need to scrutinize every detail that the situation has and avoid jumping into an immediate judgment, because handling a case analysis is just like trying to understand the personality of a stranger that you have just met, and you don't judge them because of their physical traits. We judge them once we have experienced their company. So we have here strategic decision maker. This is the position of the senior executive that are responsible for resolving the situation described in the case. So this includes chief executive officers, chief financial officers, controllers, presidents, vice presidents, and board of directors. What are the responsibility of the decision makers? We have here to forecast outcomes. So a good decision maker should be able to decipher the possible outcomes of the different decisions he is trying to weigh out. It is essential to consider it because decision makers rely on only on possibilities. That's why they need to be rational and critical in checking things ahead of time. Another responsibility that decision maker has is to alter the structure. They can create a team within the organization and assign them different works. This happens if a decision maker wants to address specific concern, or if he wants to increase company productivity or adapt to the market changes and transform organizational structure. But it all still depends on the information of the decision makers have gathered from the internal matters or external forces, whether to decide on rearranging organization. Now we have here communicating directions. So decision makers at the top level should inform the whole organization to what direction does he wants the company to lead on. The only way to do that is to communicate and disseminate important information. This is what we call downward communication, wherein information flows from the top management down to the lower management. Next we have here is cultivating culture. Decision makers should not just be aware with the existing culture that the organization has. They also need to shape organizational culture and base it to what do they really want to achieve. Now we have here one of a strategic decision maker, which is the board of directors. So board of directors has a responsibility to step in when a management crisis threatens the company. So the previous group has discussed the role of board of directors in the company. Now let me recap or talk about the process and involvement of the board of directors in the decision making. The board of directors chairman organizes the meeting to allow participation. In a meeting, all of the members of the board will debate or discuss their points, then create a decision within the duration of the allotted time in the agenda. After that, consensus of votes will be done, wherein the majority of the votes will be documented for the next board minutes. Aside from that, we are highly aware that the board of directors has the power to terminate the president only if they can provide legal evidences that the president has violated with proper procedures. Now, we have here outside consultant. So consultants often have an advantage because they can look at a situation objectively. Third-party consultant is particularly considered as a type of contractor who are responsible in providing recommendation or advices to assist the company. They usually support activities that an organization finds challenging to deal with, then entrust the development of an effective strategy to them. The advantage of outside consultant is their variety of experiences and that they have studied this field of profession and that their perspectives are broad and they were trained to work for things. Now we are going to talk about conducting the case analysis. So how do we become familiar with the material? So key informations within a case analysis is sometimes subtle, which makes them difficult to find or understand, especially if you are not familiar with the situation or the subject of the case. That is why we need to read quickly through the case one time to get an overall sense of the material, use the initial read through to assess possible links to strategic concepts, and read through the case again in depth. Make written notes as you read. Evaluate how strategic concepts might inform key decisions or suggest alternative solutions. After that, or after formulating an initial recommendation, thumb through the case again quickly to help assess the situation or the consequences of the actions that you propose. Next we have is to identify the problem. So identify the real problem, focusing on describing the case study situation and missing the underlying issues. So we have here an example as projected in the monitor. Company A is starting to lose their customers to a new competitor, which is Company B. And they have discovered that people had preferred Company B for its fast delivery service, even if their products are way inferior than Company A. The problem here is that Company A have inferior delivery technology or as compared to its competitor who may have dealt with couriers and offered various delivery options for their customers. Then because they haven't spent enough attention to the marketing efforts or yes, to their marketing efforts, the customers haven't noticed that their products offer superior value than their competitor. Lastly, they fail to make efforts to obtain new customers and maintain strong relationship with their existing ones. So I have here an example of some of the dominating brands here in the Philippines. Samsung is known for their mobile series like Note series, A series, S series, and so forth. Likewise, they are known for the variety of their gadgets. They offer high-end products with high quality performance and great specification for smooth processing. And they are also considered as the key players in terms of global share, now leading the game from its closest competitors like Huawei and Apple. However, in this case, we are going to check or evaluate Samsung's performance in a local setting. So according to the latest statistics of the leading mobile phone here in the Philippines for the year 2020, Vivo swept almost 20.9% of the market share, leaving Samsung a 9.6% of share. Although Samsung offers superior value at an expensive price, Vivo, on the other hand, also offers superior value through specifications and especially camera quality at a budget-friendly price. Since Philippine market is mostly comprised of large numbers of price-sensitive consumers with high value expectations from the product, people immediately flock their way to Vivo. Aside from that, Vivo has well-established brand awareness through local advertisements and has introduced interesting updated model time by time. Furthermore, having their subsidiary products such as Oppo helps pull their sales. Why does Samsung price their product expensively? It's because they have spent so much efforts for research and development. They also manufacture their products at South Korea or Vietnam, spends for their advertisements, and sets higher profit margin per units of their products. The advantage that Vivo got from Samsung is that its manufacturing country, China, offers low labor costs, which makes them efficiently budget their capitals. So I have stated here the problem that Samsung has. Their outdated and expensive phone models, their lack of marketing efforts for budget series phones, and their lack of marketing communication. Conducting strategic analysis is an essential element to formulate strategic planning for decision making and smooth working of that organization. So, in determining what or which strategic issues are involved, we need to ask first these questions before conducting strategic analysis. So, is there a problem in the company's competitive environment, or is it an internal problem or external problem? If it is internal, does it have to do with organizational structure, strategic controls, or uses of technology? Does the company overworks its employees or underutilize its intellectual capital? Has the company mishandled a merger, chosen the wrong diversification strategy, or botched a new product introduction? In conducting strategic analysis, we need to determine which strategic issues are involved, or we need to use strategic tools to conduct the analysis and test our own assumptions about the case. You may conduct an analysis regarding the environmental and competitive environment with the use of different tools like Porter's 5 analysis. Aside from that, there are more important tools that must be considered in conducting an effective case analysis, such as financial ratio and other steps for case analysis. And that will be discussed by the next reporter. That's all for my report. Thank you for listening.
Great morning, everyone. I am Hannah Sofia Mendoza from the fourth group, and today I'm going to discuss the continuation of the steps on how to conduct case analysis. So, in the previous topic, it is said that financial ratio analysis is one of the primary tools that is used to conduct case analysis. So, as you can see here on the screen, Exhibit 4.1 provides a summary of financial ratio analysis techniques, and we're going to discuss it one by one. First, let's start with the short-term solvency ratios. These are ratios used to judge the adequacy of liquid assets for meeting short-term obligations as they come due. This includes the current ratio, the quick ratio, and the cash ratio. The first ratio, or the current ratio, measures a company's ability to pay off its current liabilities with its current assets, such as cash, accounts receivables, and inventories. The formula in calculating this ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. Next one is the quick ratio. It measures a company's ability to meet its short-term obligations with its most liquid assets, and therefore excludes inventories from its current assets. And the formula in calculating quick ratio is current assets minus inventories divided by current liabilities. The third one is cash ratio. It is sometimes referred to as the cash asset ratio, and it is a liquidity metric that indicates a company's capacity to pay off short-term debt obligations with its cash and cash equivalents. The formula in calculating this is cash plus cash equivalents then divided by the current liabilities. Next one is the long-term solvency or financial leverage ratios. Okay, so it is also known as the leverage ratios, which determines an entity's ability to service its debt. So these ratios calculate if the company can meet its long-term debt. And it is very important since the investors would like to know about the solvency of the firm to meet their interest payments and also to ensure that their investments are safe. And one thing to make note of is the difference between solvency ratios and the liquidity ratios, because these two are often confused for the other. Liquidity ratios, or the one which we have discussed earlier, um, is what we call the short-term debt, and the solvency ratios, on the other hand, analyzes the ability to pay long-term debt. Okay. So here we're going to discuss the most important solvency ratios. The first one is the debt ratio. It is one of the financial leverage ratios that measure the ratio of a company's total debt against the total asset. It is the fundamental business solvency ratio because investors, the creditors, and banks are always concerned about the company's ability to pay them. It can be calculated by dividing its total liabilities with total assets. Next is the debt to equity ratio. It plays an important role in determining a company's leverage position. It is the percentage of shareholders' equity against total debt used to finance a company. It can be calculated by dividing total liabilities by total equity. The third one is the equity multiplier. It is a financial leverage ratio that measures the amount of a firm's assets that are financed by its shareholders by comparing total assets with total shareholders' equity. It is calculated by dividing total assets by total stockholders' equity. The fourth one is the times interest earned ratio. Um, it measures the proportionate amount of income that can be used to cover interest expenses in the future. So obviously, the larger ratios are considered more favorable than smaller ratios. And in some respects, the times interest ratio is considered a solvency ratio because it measures a firm's ability to make interest and debt service payments. And the formula in calculating this is by dividing income before interest and income taxes by the interest expense. The last one under this category is the cash coverage ratio, which is used to determine whether the company has sufficient income to cover interest expenses. It is calculated by adding earnings before interest and taxes and the depreciation expense, then divided by the interest expense. The third category is the asset utilization ratios or turnover ratios. It measures how efficient a business is at using its assets to make money. Under this category is the first inventory turnover ratio. It measures the number of times inventory is sold or consumed in a given time period. It is calculated by dividing the cost of goods sold or the COGS by the average inventory. Second is days sales in inventory. The financial ratio days sales in inventory tells you the number of days it took a company to sell its inventory during a recent year. And the calculation of the days sales in inventory is the number of days in a year divided by the inventory turnover ratio. The third one is the receivables turnover ratio. Okay, so it is an accounting measure used to quantify a company's effectiveness in collecting its receivables or money owed by the clients. And the formula in getting this is by dividing the value of net credit sales for the period by the average accounts receivable. The fourth one is the days sales in accounts receivable. It tells you the number of days it took to collect the company's accounts receivable during the past year. It is calculated as the number of days in the year divided by the accounts receivable turnover ratio during a past year. Okay, the fifth one is the asset turnover ratio. The asset turnover ratio is an efficiency ratio that measures a company's ability to generate sales from its assets by comparing net sales with average total assets. And in other words, this ratio shows how efficiently a company can use its assets to generate sales. And it is calculated by dividing net sales by average total assets. The last one under this category is the capital intensity ratio, and it measured the amount of capital needed per dollar of revenue. It is a ratio analysis tool that companies often use to show how well the business is utilizing its assets in generating revenues. And it is calculated by dividing the total assets of a company by its sales. Next category is the profitability ratios. These are financial metrics used by analysts and investors to measure and evaluate the ability of a company to generate income or the profit, which is relative to revenue, the balance sheets, and others. Next is the return on assets or ROA. It is an indicator of how profitable a company is relative to its total assets, and it gives a manager, investor, or analyst an idea as to how efficient a company's management is at using its assets to generate earnings. It is calculated by dividing a company's net income by total assets. The third one is return on equity. It is a profitability ratio that measures the ability of a firm to generate profits from its shareholders' investments in the company. It is an indicator of how effective management is at using equity financing to fund operations and grow the company. The formula is calculated by dividing net income by shareholders' equity. The last category is the market value ratios. Um, it is important for investors, management, and others because these ratios are used to decide whether the valuation of shares is overvalued, undervalued, or at par with the market. And these ratios are used for making investment decisions in stocks of companies. The first one under this category is the price to earnings ratio. It is most used and important ratio under this category of ratios. It is used to check whether the shares are over or underpriced as compared to its earnings potential. It is measured as the price of the share in the current time against the earnings of the company, which they reported for the financial period on per share basis. The formula is price per share divided by earnings per share. The next under this category is the market to book ratio. It shows the relation between the market value of a share to its book value, and thus one can easily figure out the difference between the two to evaluate whether the prices are under or overvalued as per the equity standing in the books. It can be calculated by dividing price of one share by the book value of one share. Okay, next. Okay, so in this part of the overall strategic analysis process or conducting strategic analysis, it is also important to test your own assumptions about the case. Our conclusions are often based on assumptions that we haven't thought about critically. And just because we assume something is true doesn't mean it is. Okay? So we have to think carefully about our assumptions when finding and analyzing information, and also we have to think carefully about the assumptions of others. The very first thing you have to ask yourself to test your assumption is, what assumptions are you making about the case materials? It may be that you have interpreted the case content differently than your team members or classmates. Being clear about these assumptions will be important in determining how to analyze the case. The second, what assumptions have you made about the best way to resolve the problems? You have to ask yourself why you have chosen one type of analysis over another, because this process of assumption checking can also help determine if you have gotten to the heart of the problem, right? Next is proposing alternative solutions. This is the next step of how to conduct a strategic analysis. Okay, so it is important to remember that in strategic management case analysis, there is rarely one right answer or one best way. Even when members of a class or a team agree on what the problem is, they may not agree upon how to solve the problem. Therefore, it is helpful to consider several different solutions. Okay? And after conducting strategic analysis and identifying the problem, you have to develop a list of options. And from that options, determine what are the possible solutions and what are the alternatives, right? Considering multiple alternatives can significantly enhance the value of your ideal solution. And once you have decided on the what should be model, this target standard becomes the basis for developing a roadmap for investigating alternatives. And in identifying potential alternatives, brainstorming with a group can be an excellent tool for it. You have to think of as many possibilities as possible. And from that, you have to write down these ideas. And after brainstorming with your team, it is important to weigh the alternatives. And once a number of ideas have been generated, you need to assess each of them to see how effective they might be in addressing the problem. In weighing alternatives, few things you need to ask yourself, and these are as follows. Can the company afford it? How will it affect the bottom line? Here, you have to assess whether the company has the capability to implement such alternatives or solutions. You should not just think of the possible solutions, but you should also test if it is attainable. Second, is the solution likely to evoke a competitive response? Here, you need to ensure whether the proposed solution will make your competitors react. Third, will employees throughout the company accept the changes? What impact will the solution have on morale? You should also take into considerations the welfare of the employees, and it is important to assess the effect that it could contribute to employees. This is because employees are one of the important assets of the company. That's why taking into considerations what they might feel about these changes is an important thing to do. Next, how will the decision affect other stakeholders? Will customers, suppliers, and others buy into it? Okay, it is not only the employees that you need to take into account in making these alternatives, but also the stakeholders, the customers, the suppliers, and many more. Next, how does this solution fit with the company's vision, mission, and objectives? You also need to consider whether the alternatives fits within the organizational constraints. And the last one is, will the culture or values of the company be changed by the solution? Is it a positive change? You also have to bear in mind the implications of this solution to the entirety of the organization. If it would contribute for some changes within the organization, make sure that it is for the betterment of the organization. And next step in conducting strategic analysis is making recommendations. The basic aim of case analysis is to find solutions. Your analysis is not complete until you have recommended a course of actions. Okay, so in making recommendations, you have to state what are the next steps that needs to be taken to address a problem. What are the immediate actions that need to be implemented to solve a particular concern? And what needs to be corrected, what needs to be avoided to solve a problem. And also, the recommendation should include suggestions for how best to implement the proposed solution because the recommended actions and their implications for the performance and future of the firm are interrelated. You have to recall that the solution you propose must solve the problem you identified. You have to make a logical argument that shows how the problem led to the analysis and how the analysis led to the recommendations that you are proposing. You must remember that an analysis is not an end in itself. It is useful only if it leads to a solution. Okay. Next is here the exhibit 4.2 provides some tips for preparing an oral case presentation, and it will be further discussed on the following screen. The first one is organize your thoughts. You have to begin by becoming familiar with the material. And if you are working with a team, you have to compare notes about the key points of the case, and you have to share insights that other members may have gleaned about the tables and exhibits. Then from those notes, start creating an outline because that is one of the best ways for you to organize the flow and content of your presentation. Here, these are the few things that you must do. Brainstorm your topic and write a rough outline. Then organize your material and draft what you want to say. Last is you have to summarize your draft into key points to write on note cards. All right. Next is the emphasize strategic analysis. The purpose of case analysis is to diagnose the problems and solutions, right? And in this process, you may be required to rearrange it in a fashion that it can be more effectively analyzed. Therefore, you must present the material in a way that lends itself to analysis. You should not just simply restate what is in the case because they can read that, right? And in emphasizing strategic analysis, it involves three major categories with the following emphasis. First one is background or the problem statement. All right, this consists of 10 to 20%, the emphasis. Next one is the strategic analysis options, which have 60 to 75% emphasis. And the last one is the recommendations or action plan, which consists of 10 to 20%. As you can see, as I mentioned a while ago, the strategic analysis options has 60 to 75% emphasis, meaning you have to emphasize your strategic analysis. Next one is be logical and consistent. A listener may get confused if your presentation is rumbled and is hard to follow because it may cause them to um, be confused about what you are trying to say, and it might cause you to fail in creating a good discussion. As for this reason, you have to present your arguments and explanations in a logical sequence and make sure that the solutions you recommend addresses the problems you have identified. Next one, defend your position. Of course, we all know that presenting a presentation is usually done orally and is followed by a class discussion. In that case, you have to anticipate what others might disagree with your presentation, and you have to be prepared to defend your views. This means being aware of the choices you made and the implications of your recommendations. You have to be clear about your assumptions, and you have to be able to expand on your analysis. And the last one is share presentation responsibilities. Aside from it is done orally, strategic management case analysis are often conducted by teams. Therefore, each member of the team should have a clear role in the oral presentation. And it is also important to coordinate the different parts of the presentation into a logical, smooth flowing whole, because how well team members work together is usually very apparent during an oral presentation. That would be all for my topic. Thank you so much for listening.
So my topic is all about how to get the most from case analysis. One of the reasons case analysis is so enriching as a learning tool is that it draws on many resources and skills besides just what is in the textbook. Case analysis is a learning tool that uses many resources and skills. It is not just based on fiction or textbooks, but based on real life scenario. This can help to expound knowledge in certain scenario of life or specific problems that may encounter in the future. To get the most out of case analysis, expand your horizons beyond the concepts in this text and seek insights from your own reservoir of knowledge. We need to get the most out of our case analysis, and in doing this, we need to expand our horizons and understanding capacity. Not every solution that we need in our case analysis is in the textbooks or concepts written in a piece of paper, but it can also be based on our experiences, own knowledge, or others' perspective. The first thing we need to have is an open mind. If we are open to anything and not just focus on one perspective, this will help us to understand deeply what the case is all about. A case analysis discussion often evokes strong opinions and high emotions. Solving a case analysis may release strong opinions and high emotions. It is important to control the emotions, and not to press your opinion just because you know that it is relevant. Many viewpoints usually lead to a more complete analysis. Different perspective will lead to many viewpoints. Learn to listen to each other and understand each other's point of view. Your mind should be open to every possible answer or solution. Once you evaluate what is said, you may disagree with it or dismiss it as faulty. Not everyone's point of view is relevant or right fit to the case. You may disagree or dismiss it, but in a proper way. Explain why their opinion should not be included in the list of possible answers and address it properly. Open mind. To wait until you know all the facts before forming an opinion or making a judgment. Open mind means listening, understanding, learning, addressing the case before giving a plausible opinion or judgment. Next is take a stand for what you believe. State your views proactively. Stating your views before them is taking a stand for what you studied and for what you believe. Being proactive means you make things happen instead of waiting for them to happen to you. You do it once the opportunity arises for you. Analyze the case from the perspective of your own background and belief system. Before you seek for others' point of view, you should start from yourself. Studying thoroughly the case can help you state what should be done and what to do next. First, believe in yourself, then prove to others that you are right and they should listen to what you are going to say. For one thing, when a person takes a strong stand, it often encourages others to evaluate the issues more closely. This can lead to a more thorough investigation and a more meaningful class discussion. Sometimes, when you take a strong stand, you can also uplift the chance of having a lot of people believe in what you can do and what you are going to say. In this way, you encourage people to look at the case closely and have a thorough investigation and a meaningful discussion. Next is draw on your personal experience. First-hand experience usually represents a welcome contribution to the overall quality of case discussions. As I said, not every answer to a case is in the textbooks or written in a piece of paper, but also can come to your own experience or knowledge. First-hand experience are a big help to solve a case. Next is participate and persuade. People who are persuasive and speak their mind can often influence the views of others. People who know to deliver themselves and their words often influence the views of others. Confidence in every word you utter will have a big impact to the audience's trust in you and your skills. First, you must be prepared and convincing. In delivering words, you must be mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared, and you must be a convincing type of person since you will want the other's approval of your proposed solution to the case. Next, it involves understanding all sides of an argument. Participating in an argument should always be a healthy competition, and you must understand each point of view and all sides of argument. Overcome objections to your own point of view. You need to overcome objections. In short, you need to answer confidently to the question other people might ask you. To convince other people, you must have justification of your own answer. Think of every possible question and come up with a plausible and relevant answer. Next, be concise and to the point. Make your arguments in a way that is explicit and direct. State your argument in a clean, clear, detailed, and direct to the point way of delivering words because no one wants to have a speaker that has too many stated indirect points and irrelevant information. Next, zero in on the most important points. Zero in means to focus on something. So you must focus on the most important points and discuss each briefly. Next is be brief. Do not take too much time in explaining things. Talk only about relevant information, and concise everything as much as possible. Don't try to make a lot of points at once by jumping around between topics. Do not jump topic to topic. Focus on one thing, then explain before moving on to the next point. Avoid trying to explain the whole case situation at once. Avoid summarizing it quickly into few words. Talk about the points, then summarize it in the end. Do not speak slow nor fast. Speak moderately to let the audience and the speaker to take a breath occasionally. Stay focused and be specific. Stay focused on what is important and always be specific on what you're going to say. Last one is think out of the box. Being a little provocative is equally important to being imaginative and creative when making a recommendation or determining how to implement a solution. You need to push a little your idea and start provoking people to believe in you. It is equally important in being imaginative and creative when deciding or recommending a solution. Albert Einstein once stated, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, but imagination is unlimited. Knowledge has limitations. We can only learn certain things and understand simple actions, while imagination can go beyond what we can think of and do things without any hindrance. Knowledge is plausible, but imagination can or cannot be plausible at all. Strategic management insights must be applied to each case differently. Just knowing the principles is not enough. Imagination and out of the box thinking help to apply strategic knowledge in novel and unique ways. Knowing only the principles and no experience to apply is not enough to come up a solution to any case. Imagining things, if you do it this way, may help to understand deeply what connection you are looking for. Thinking out of the box is like being open minded. You do not close your knowledge in just a small amount of information. You need to apply real life solution in strategic ways. So that's the end of my report. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cariza Ansi Singson and I'm going to continue the report. Learn from the insight of others. Before you make up your mind about a case, hear what others have to say. Get a second opinion and a third and so forth. So listening to others may give you some point that can be a key to finding answers within the case. People tend to believe authority figures. Many people believe in President Duterte just because he is the president. We tend to ignore Vice President Robredo just because she is just the vice president. Same with companies. Many workers or employees tend to place a higher value on what a company president says. However, statements of middle managers may represent a point of view that is even more helpful for finding solutions to the problems. Apply insights from other case analysis. So if you have conducted few or several case analysis before, include, use, or incorporate the insights that you have learned from the text and examples and your own previous case discussions into each new case that you analyze. Critically analyze your own performance. Ask yourself, this technique not only will make you more fair in your assessment of others, but also will indicate how your own performance can improve. Performance appraisals are a standard part of many workplace situations. They are used to determine promotions, raises, or work assignments. In some organizations, everyone from top executive down is subject to reviews. Even the owner or the CEO that are not evaluated by others are often find useful to ask themselves regularly, am I being effective? The same thing can be applied to your performance in case analysis. Were my comments insightful? Did I make good contribution? How might I improve next time? What grade would you give yourself? Use the same criteria on yourself that you use to evaluate others. Conduct outside research. You can enhance your understanding of a case situation by investigating sources outside the case materials. Such information can usually spur additional discussion and enrich the case analysis. For example, you want to study an industry more closely or research a company's close competitors. You may gather some information on business presses or online. Some companies itself provides information on their websites, such as annual reports. So, here are some additional guidelines for preparing a written case analysis. So, the first one is be thorough. It has to be more complete, which means writing out the problem statement and articulating assumptions. It is also important to provide support for your arguments and reference case materials or other facts more specifically, which means that writing a case analysis must be complete, detailed, and carefully written. Provide supports or evidences. It must be from reliable sources. It must have references or proofs which supports your arguments. Coordinate team efforts. You may disagree about the diagnosis or recommended plan of action. Make sure you have coordinated your responses. Don't prepare a written analysis that appears contradictory or looks like a patchwork of disconnected thoughts. So, when having discussion, you may disagree if you think that your team's diagnosis or recommendation is unreasonable or doesn't fit with your case analysis. Say anything what you think is needed, essential, or relevant that can be helpful in writing your case analysis. Listen to your team's ideas, suggestions, or recommendations because this leads to a healthy and deeper understanding of the case material. Avoid restating the obvious or avoid obvious padding. There is no reason to restate material that everyone is familiar with already, namely the case content. Stay focused on the key points, restate only the information that is most central to your analysis. So according to Paul Roberts, an American journalist, avoid filter content to try to add to the word count. When sentences can be written in a few words, it should be not turned into a paragraph. Not just because a sentence can be said in 45 words instead of 7, it doesn't mean that it is not the route that should be taken. Instead of stuffing sentences with straw, useless phrases or words, make sentences direct to the point. Do not say in 12 words what you can say in 5 words. Do not just take a couple of obvious points and write 6 paragraphs. Present information graphically. Tables, graphs, and other exhibits are usually one of the best ways to present factual material that supports your argument. For example, financial calculations such as break-even analysis, sensitivity analysis, or return on investment are best presented graphically. Even the qualitative information such as product lists. Exercise quality control. It is important to use good grammar, avoid misspelling words, and eliminate typos and other visual distractions. Make your written presentation appear as professional as possible. Do not let the appearance of your written case keep the reader from recognizing the importance and quality of your analysis. So, avoid mistakes, especially when writing a case analysis. Uh, Oral presentation or class discussion can be glossed over, while mistakes in written are often highlighted. So thank you for listening. That's all.
So, hi everyone, my name is Ranlyn Sales. I'm one of the reporters of Group 4. So, now we will move on to another topic. So, now that we know how to conduct case analysis from the previous reporter, we will now go on to useful decision-making techniques in case analysis. So the demands on today's business leaders require them to perform a wide variety of functions. The success of their organization often depends on how they, as individuals and as part of the groups, meet challenges. So, in this topic, we will address the three different techniques that can help managers make better decisions and, in turn, enable their organization to achieve higher performance. So, the first step is the integrative thinking. So, how does a leader make good strategic decisions in the face of multiple contingencies and diverse opportunities? So, a study by Roger L. Martin reveals that executives who have a capability known as integrative thinking are among the most effective leaders. So, based on his book, The Opposable Mind, people who can consider two conflicting ideas simultaneously without dismissing one of the ideas or becoming discouraged about reconciling them often make the best problem solvers because of their ability to creatively synthesize the opposing thoughts. So, in contrast to conventional thinking, which tends to focus on making choices between competing ideas from a limited set of alternatives, integrative thinking basically is the process by which people reconcile opposing thoughts to identify creative solutions that provide them with more options and new opportunities. So, for us to be an effective decision maker and integrative thinker, we should have the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So, all great leaders who apply integrative thinking go through a decision making process when examining a problem, whether that problem is small or large or huge. Mar- Martin believes this involves four steps. So, that four steps of integrative thinking and deciding process are salience, causality, architecture, and resolution. So we will use a simple example based on our module or IM of deciding where to go on a vacation to illustrate the steps for us to differentiate them to one another. So the first one or the first step is the salience. So this simply means which of all the factors does the decision maker take into account as relevant and important. So when deciding where to go on a vacation, for example, here, where will you go? What will you see? Where will you stay? What will it cost? Or is it safe? So at this stage, information and factors or variables relevant for the decision have to be considered. So um, this in this step, the more factors or the more variable there are, the more complexity and work is introduced, right? So for some, this and they may find it problematic, but for integrative thinkers, they will or they don't mind mess. In fact, they will embrace it because it assures them that they haven't dismissed anything that may illuminate the problem as a whole. So they welcome complexity because um, that's where the best answer come from. So they are confident that they'll find their way through it and emerge on the other side with a clear resolution. So the next step is causality. In this step, you attempt to analyze how many factors relate to one another. For example, is it worth it to invite friends to share expenses? Will an exotic destination be less safe? So, here you attentively explore causal relationship between salient factors for your decision and eventual choices. So, when analyzing causality, um, do not limit your analysis to linear relationship, but extend it to nonlinear causality and multi-directional causal relationship. Why? Because this is to develop multiple causal models and consider many alternative theories. So, the third step is the architecture. This allows the person deciding to think ahead, to be proactive, and understand the pitfalls that could occur once the decision is finalized. For example, will you make the hotel and flight arrangements first or focus on which sightseeing tours are available? So, one way to approach this stage is to reflect on your thinking. So, when envisioning decision architecture, try to avoid breaking problems into sub-problems, as it may mean losing some relevant causal relationship indispensable for the whole problem resolution. So, for the last but most critical integrative step is the resolution. So, for example, here, choose which destination, which flight, and so forth. So, based on our example, we have to decide where to go on a vacation. So, for the resolution, you have to finalize your decision on what destination or which flight you will go to. So, an integrative thinker is always reworking the decision for the best outcome, not the most timely one. So being right here is more important than being on time. So all these steps, determining what is salient, analyzing the causal relationship between the salient factors, examining the architecture of the problem will lead to an outcome or resolution. So here you can see the outline of the integrative thinking and deciding process. So as illustrated in the diagram, choice options cascade down from higher order choices. High order choices both set the context for and constrain lower order choices. Choices are related so that if a lower order choices can't be constructed to fit within the context and constraint of a higher order choice, then the higher order choice must be revisited and revised until consistent lower order choices can be made. So to make it simple, salience is look at the outline on the screen. So of course salience is the higher order choice, right? And causality is the lower order choice. So if causality can't be constructed to fit within the context and constraint of salience, then you should go back to salience and revise it until consistent causality can be made. So, when applied to business, an integrative thinking approach enables decision makers to consider situations not as forced trade offs, either decrease costs or invest more, either satisfy shareholders or please the community, but as a method for synthesizing opposing ideas into a creative solution. So the key here is to think in terms of both an and rather than either or. So for the next technique, asking heretical questions. These are questions that challenge conventional wisdom and may or even seem odd or unusual, but they often lead to valuable innovations. So, when we say conventional, it is based or in accordance with what is generally done or believed. So, heretical questions can address issues that are both small and large, from redesigning a single process to rethinking the whole business model. So here is a simple here is a one sample heretical question. So this is a sample of heretical question that I googled. So how can we manufacture without water or another scarce resources? So in that question, you can make or develop a solution and even innovate a product as a new source of revenue. So you help solve the problem at the same time you have another source of revenue. For example, you have a business that requires a need of water. So you have to innovate or develop another product or another item that can manufacture your business without water. So basically, if if a question challenge your conventional wisdom, that is a heretical question. So the next technique is the conflict inducing technique, and I believe this is the last technique. So um so conflict inducing technique in every organization or even in other setting like family or with friends, you will frequently analyzing cases or solving problems. So conflict, when we say conflict, it is a serious disagreement between two parties. So while the word conflict often has a negative connotation, it can be very helpful in arriving at better solutions to cases. So when speaking of conflict, mainly there are two types. So the first one is the constructive conflict and the second one is the destructive conflict. And what I'm talking about here that can help or that can be very helpful in arriving at better solution to cases is the constructive conflict. So constructive conflict, even though a disagreement between two parties emerges, this can be resolved in a positive manner so that it can benefit both parties or even the organization or the company. So, As I've said earlier, it can be very helpful in arriving at better solutions to cases, and it can provide an effective means for new insights as well as for rigorously questioning and analyzing assumptions and strategic alternatives. So let's assume that the conflict emerge in a group of employees who are assigned to a particular task. This is an example, okay? So both employees feel the need to achieve the target or quota, but they have different strategies. Through constructive conflict, the two employees can find solution by working as a team. So this then improves the team performance and them as individuals as well. So yeah, um, in working as a group, you probably learn or experience the concept of groupthink. So groupthink, it is a term coined by Irving Janis or Irving Janis. I don't know. It is a condition in which group members strive to reach agreement or consensus without realistically considering other viable alternatives. So basically, groupthink is to accept viewpoint or conclusion that represents a perceived group consensus, whether or not the group members believe it to be valid or correct. So groupthink, it is a negative phenomenon that can lead to poor decision and reduces efficiency. So we really need to understand how to work in groups. So learn more about the groupthink. It will be discussed by the next reporter, Song Kayawon. So that's all for my report. Again, my name is Ranlene Sales. Thank you for listening.
Great morning, everyone. I am Rin Helmina Sanghayangan, and I'm going to report about symptoms of groupthink, how to prevent it, and also the antidotes on how to solve it. Uh, Groupthink was already discussed by the late reporter, but I'm going to add an additional information about it. It is a phenomenon that occurs when the desire for group consensus overrides people's common sense desire to present alternatives. It was presented by the psychologist Irving Janis from 1982, and it was discussed in his books and lately gave a research about it from the psychologist. So today, many decisions in organizations are made by groups, teams, or committees. There are benefits of group decisions over individual decisions. Groups have the potential to generate and evaluate more ideas, opinions, and once a decision is made, acceptance will be easier. So, one more constraint of effective group decision making is groupthink. There are several ways in which an organization can encounter the effects of groupthink and improve the decision making. It can develop advocacy and dialectical inquiry to evaluate proposed solutions to problems, and I'm going to tackle it later. So, today, many decisions in organizations are made by groups or teams, as I said. So, let's first tackle with the benefits of the group decisions making. It is believed that group decisions making results in a number of benefits or individual decision making, which are includes in academics that we think about on how to solve the problem solvings, on analyzations of the case analysis and case studies that we are having a task on our proposal, right? So that's it, including increased decision quality, creativity, acceptance, understanding, judgment, and accuracy. So let's move forward. Okay, so let's move forward to my topic, which is the symptoms of groupthink and how to prevent it. Uh, I have pointed out the potential benefits of group decision making over individual decisions. However, the social nature of group processes can negatively affect performance. More specifically, one common constraint of effective group decision making is groupthink, right? As what I said earlier, that it was introduced by Irving Janis in 1982, coined the term groupthink, and which happens when a group pressures lead to the deterioration and mental efficiency, forecasting of reality, and lacks moral judgment. It tends to occur in highly cohesive groups in which the group members' desire for consensus becomes more important than evaluating problems and solutions realistically. An example would be the top executive cabinet, the president and the vice president, right? Of a firm who have worked together for many years. Like they really know each other well and think as a cohesive unit rather than a collective collection of individuals. So psychologist Janice identified 8 symptoms of groupthink. But before that, before we proceed to the symptoms of groupthink, I would like to give an example of groupthink. So one example would be the group of people who very firmly believe in a particular limited political ideas, like a fan of political party or a supporters of a political party. Like for example, here in the Philippines, like they only watch news that supports their ideal and who only associate with the people who agree with on what we are believe and who are they support with. The group may one come to hate and distrust people who disagree, right? Because if you disagree, like you're not part of the group, you're the counterfeit. That's it. So within and may come to overestimate their power and influence. It's just roaming around the circle of their group. And so let's step forward to the number one constraint of the symptoms and how to prevent it. So, number one is an illusion of invulnerability. So, invulnerability, most of or all group members develop an illusion of an invulnerability, which causes them to become overly optimistic and take extreme risk, right? Number two is a belief in the inherent morality of the group. So, rationalization, right? So group members collectively rationalize in order to discount warnings that might lead them to reconcile their assumptions before they recommit themselves to their past policy decisions. Next is stereotype views of members of opposing groups or the morality. So the group members develop an unquestioned belief in the group's inherent morality, inclining the members to ignore ethical and moral consequences of their decisions or decision making. Like in the organization, we are having a decision making, yet the group members develop an unquestioned belief inherent the morality or ethicals. Next is stereotyping. That's under the morality. So under the stereotyping or the stereotype views of members opposing groups in a certain group, these group members develop stereotype views of opposition leaders as too evil to warrant genuine attempts to negotiate or as too weak and stupid to counter whatever risky attempts are made to defeat their purposes, right? So next is the practice of self-censorship. With this, a self-censorship, um, with this, group members censor themselves from any deviations from the apparent group consensus, reflecting each other's inclination to minimize the importance of his or her doubts, and also the counter arguments that would rather be the outcome. And also, next is the illusion of anonymity. With this, group members perceive a shared illusion of anonymity concerning judgments, confirming to the majority view, partly resulting from the self-censorship of the patients, augmented by the false assumption that silence means consent. What I mean consent. So also the appointment of mind guards. The mind guards. So in this mind guards, some group members appoint themselves to protect the group from adverse information that might shatter their shared complacency about the effectiveness and morality of their decisions. So in the module, there is no pressure, and I would like to add this as a constraint or as a symptoms of grouping also. So I come up with this thought that pressure is could be one of the symptoms because group members apply direct pressure on any member who expresses strong arguments against any of the group's stereotypes, illusions, or commitments, making clear that this type of dissent is contrary what is expected of all loyal members. So the likelihood that groupthink will emerge is greatest when the group is cohesive, the group becomes insulated from powerful outsiders, the leader promotes his or her own favored solution. So in suggesting ways of avoiding groupthink, Janice hopes to reduce cohesiveness and open decision activity in various ways. So he come up to the solutions on how to prevent it. So, and finally, different group decision-making techniques can be used to limit the effects of groupthink and other problems inherent in shared decision-making. So, here are the 9 problem solvings or the avoiding or the suggestions to avoid the groupthink. So, number 1 is the leader must encourage group members to address their concerns and objectives. So for this, the leader of a policy forming group should assign the role of critical evaluator to each member, encouraging the group to give high priority to airing objections and doubts. Number 2, when higher level managers assign a problem for a group to solve, they should adopt an impartial stance and not measure their preferences. This tackling about the leaders in an organization's hierarchy. Because when assigning a policy planning mission to a group, should be impartial instead of stating their preferences, expectations at the outset. Number 3, before a group reaches its final decision, the leader should encourage members to discuss their deliberations with trusted associates and then report their perspectives back to the group. The organization should routinely follow the administrative practice of setting up several independent policy planning and evaluation groups to work on the same policy question, each carrying out its deliberations under a different leader. Next is the group should invite outside experts and encourage them to challenge the group's viewpoints and positions. So for this number 4, through the period when the feasibility and effectiveness of policy alternatives are being surveyed, the policymaking group should take time to time, divide into 2 or more subgroups to meet separately under different chairpersons, and then come together to reconcile their differences. So, and number 5, the group should divide into subgroups, meet at various times under different chairpersons, and they get together to resolve differences. And that's what I'm talking about, the diversity, that in order to solve this, they should have different perspectives, ideas, and opinions to brainstorm with. Also, I would like to clear that brainstorm and groupthink is different from each other because it's only a sub and it's a negative effect of groupthink is a negative effect and brainstorm is something that groups coming up with. And also, groupthink is about creating an idea with the same person, with the same interest, same perspective, same opinion in a circle. So they have the same interest in a group. So there are no other ideas that from the outside that could interfere the idea of the center. Unlike the brainstorm is coming from the different perspectives, just like for us in a school, right, where the professors or the teachers um, putting up in a groups, putting us in a groups, and then brainstorm and sharing ideas, sharing different opinions, and then making up with a big great idea. Yes. So that's it. So number 6, after reaching a preliminary agreement, the group should hold a second chance meeting that provides members a forum to express any remaining concerns and rethink the issue prior to making a final decision. So it said that each member of the policymaking group should periodically discuss the group's deliberations with trusted associates with these are on the organizations and report their transactions back to the group. Also, one or more outside experts or qualified colleagues within the organization who are not core members of the policymaking group should be invited to each meeting on a staggered basis and should be encouraged to challenge the views of the core members. So, using conflict to improve decision making. So it is an addition to the above suggestions from the effective use of conflict can be a means of improving decision making. Yes, so these are the structures used to overcome groupthink. Because group structures can help to minimize problems associated with groupthink described previously, right? And specifically, two group structures can serve as antidotes for groupthink. One is devil's advocacy, and next is dialectical inquiry. Devil's advocacy is a technique for improving the quality of group decisions. It introduces conflict into the decision-making process. Chinese suggests that this concept is an antidote for groupthink. That earlier we noted that groupthink results in inhibitions and premature conformity to group norms. Um, Devil's advocacy can nullify this and other group phenomena to which group members and are subjected. So after planning has developed alternative solutions to a problem, the plan is given to one or more staff members with instructions to find fault with it. So if the plan withstands the scrutiny of the devil's advocates, it can be presumed to the free of effects of grouping and thus viable. And by this procedure, it helps the organization to avoid causing mistakes in decision making by identifying the potential pitfalls, the downfall, or the faults that could be the outcome of the certain decision making that they are planning with and in advance. Although devil's advocacy can be used as critiquing technique after alternative solutions to a problem have been developed. It can be also used during the early stages of the decision-making process. Like for example, during a decision-making session, one member could be assigned the role of devil's advocate expressing as many objections to each to each alternative solutions to a problem as possible. Furthermore, it it is a good idea of rotating the job of devil's advocate so that no single person or group develops a strictly negative reputation. Yes. So, on the other hand, the dialectical inquiry. Like the devil's advocacy, dialectical inquiry is another approach for controlling group phenomena such as groupthink and decision making. The approach can be traced back to the dialectic school of philosophy in ancient Greece. Um, like for example, or not an example, back to the history. So Plato and his followers attempted to synthesize truths by exploring opposite positions called thesis and antithesis. And I'm going to show this by the table. Yes, that's it. That's the table for the devil's advocacy and dialectical inquiry. So going back to the dialectical inquiry, um, Plato and his followers back to the dialectical school of philosophy in ancient Greece, right? And exploring opposite positions called thesis and the antithesis. So with this, the criticisms like, or essentially, it is relying on opposing arguments in determining guilt or innocence. Like it is a debate between two opposing sets of viewpoints with a different view of points. Like us in a school, like we're in a debate. There is an anti, there is a pro. So although it stimulates problem conflict, it is a constructive approach because it elicits the benefits and limitations of opposing sets of ideas. And, and in organizations that use dialectical inquiry, um, they create teams of decision makers, and each of team is instructed to generate and evaluate alternative courses of action and then recommend the best one. Then after hearing each team's alternative courses of action, the teams and the organization's top managers meet together and select the best parts of each plan and synthesize a final plan that provides the best opportunity for success. Yes. So to end this, although agreement on an administrative plan is a goal of this approach, a full consensus does not always follow. It is important to guard against a win-lose attitude and instead concentrate on reaching the most effective solution for all concerned. I'm sorry. The outcome of decision can be viewed as a gain or a loss depending on depending on the way of the decision is framed. Therefore, the way of the decision is framed, that is a win-win situation versus the win-lose, right? It is very important. Nevertheless, a dialectical inquiry approach can produce useful indicators of the organization's planning needs. So for today, many decisions and organizations are made by groups, as what I have said before. So there are benefits of group decisions making over individual decisions. And groups can have different potential to generate and evaluate more ideas. And once a decision is made, acceptance will be easier. One common constraint of effective group decision is making is groupthink. As what I've tackled on the last reporter, and I make it as a further additional of symptoms and how to prevent it. So there are several ways in which an organization can counter the effects of groupthink and improve in decision making. It can use in a devil's advocacy and dialectical inquiry to evaluate proposed solutions to the problem which are one to solve. So that's all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Edgar Stamundong, and I'm going to report about following the analysis decision action cycle in case analysis. First is analyzing organizational goals and objectives. Vision. Vision is what you see, a verbal image of what we ultimately want to achieve. Mission is what you have, your business purpose in the market. Values is what you believe, your moral compass and expected behavior. Goals. Goals is what you want to pursue, the result we choose to accomplish. Objectives. Objectives is what you want to achieve, measurable targets along the path to our goals. Second is analyzing the external environment. Components of business environment. General environment consists of political, economic, socio-cultural, technological, legal, and environmental. Another components of business environment. The competitive environment or the five forces. First is a threat of entry, supplier power, buyer power, threat of substitutes, and the last is the threat of competitive rivalry. When analyzing the external environment, we use the strategic analysis. Strategic analysis is a process that involves researching an organization's business environment within which it operates. Strategic analysis is essential to formulate strategic planning for decision making and smooth working of that organization. Types of strategic analysis. First is the internal strategic analysis. We have the SWOT analysis or the strength, weaknesses, opportunity, and threat. Before entering a competition, first, you must understand your organization. You should conduct a SWOT analysis to know your advantage before entering a market. Next is external strategic analysis. We have the PESTEL analysis. In conducting a PESTEL analysis, we will fully understand our external environment and other factors that we may encounter outside the organization. So what is competitive intelligence? It is the action of defining, gathering, analyzing, and distributing intelligence about products, customers, competitors, and any aspect of the environment needed to support executives and managers in strategic decision making for an organization. When we have a competitive intelligence, we also gain a competitive advantage. So what is competitive advantage? It is the attributes that allows an organization to outperform their competitors. Third is analyzing the internal environment. What we need to analyze is the elements of internal environment. The elements are owners and shareholders, board of directors, employees, organizational culture, resources of the organization, and last one is the organization's image and goodwill. Value chain analysis. It is a process where a firm identifies its primary and support activities that add value to its final product and then analyze these activities to reduce cost or increase differentiation. Value chain analysis is the internal activities of a firm that transforming input into output. In conducting a value chain analysis, we will know a competitive advantage. First is the cost advantage. This is the activity of reducing the cost of the product to lower its price to gain a competitive advantage to the market. The next is differentiation advantage. This is increasing the quality of your product using high quality materials and resources to gain a competitive advantage. The resource-based view. It is a managerial framework used to determine the strategic resources that a firm can exploit to achieve sustainable competitive advantage. In a resource-based view, we will identify the tangible and intangible resources. Tangible resources has the quality that can be easily seen, touched, smelled, and that can be quantified. Intangible resources has the quality that difficult to see, touch, smell, or quantify, such as knowledge and skills. The fourth is assessing a firm's intellectual assets. Intellectual assets is an investment in brands, design, technology, or creative works. Intellectual assets is owned and legally protected by a company from outside use or implementation without consent. We can consider the human capital as the major intellectual assets of the company. Investing in human capital also promotes their skills, talents, and knowledge in the business. And also we have the intellectual property. Intellectual property can represent a competitive advantage, so it must be protected by the company that own the property. Types of intellectual property. Patents is granting the legal rights to exclude anyone else from manufacturing or marketing your unique tangible things. Copyright is protecting written or artistic expressions fixed in a tangible medium such as novels, poems, songs, or movies. Trademarks are names, phrases, sounds, or symbols used in association with services or products. Franchise is a license to the company, individual, or a party called the franchisee, purchasing allowing them to use a company's name, trademark, proprietary knowledge, and processes. So the franchisor allowing the franchisee to use under its license to sell a product or provide a service under the company's name. Trade secrets can be a formula, pattern, device, or compilation of data that can grant the users an advantage over its competitors. The fifth is formulating business level strategies. The business level strategy consists of cost leadership, product service differentiation, focus differentiation, focus low cost leadership, and integrated cost and customer differentiation. For the cost leadership, it is competing with a wide range of a business based on price. Differentiation is competing by using a product or service with entirely unique features. For the focus differentiation, not only competing through differentiation or for the unique products but also by selecting a small portion of the market to focus on. Focus low cost leadership is competing not only through a price but by selecting small portion of the market to focus on. Integrated low cost differentiation is competing by using both low cost and differentiation. So industry life cycle refers to the evolution of an industry or the business through 4 stages based on the business characteristic commonly displayed in each phase. For the phases of industry life cycle is also same as the product life cycle. The first phase is called the introduction or the startup phase, involves the development and early marketing of a new product or service in the market. The second is the growth. Consumers in the new industry have come to understand the value of the new offering and demand grows rapidly. The maturity phase begins with a shakeout period, during which growth slows, focus shifts toward expense reduction, and consolidation occurs. Market share, cash flow, and profitability become the primary goals of the remaining companies now that the growth is relatively less important. The decline phase marks the end of an industry's ability to support growth. When an industry reaches the decline phase, it has the possibility to shut down or eliminate them in the competition. The sixth is formulating corporate level strategies. Corporate level strategy is a plan made by a company to see which organization they interact with over a given period. Types of corporate level strategy. Stability strategy. It is critical to the business goal which is required to defend existing interests and strengths, to follow the business objectives, to continue with the existing business, to keep efficiency in operation. The expansion strategy, also called growth strategy, wherein the company's business is re-evaluated so as to extend the capacity and scope of business and considerably the overall investment in the business. The retrenchment strategy. A number of business activities are retrenched, cut, or reduced so as to minimize costs as a response to the financial crisis. The combination strategy. In this strategy, the enterprise combines any or all of the 3 corporate strategies so as to fulfill the firm's requirements.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jan Leon Intizan, and I was assigned to report about formulating international level strategies to fostering corporate entrepreneurship. First, when we say corporate entrepreneurship, this refers to process used to develop new businesses, products, services, or processes inside of an existing organization to create value and generate new revenue growth through entrepreneurial thought and action. So basically, when we say corporate entrepreneurship, this refers to process and which aims to create or generate new ideas that might help a company with or without existing um, processes inside of it. Wherein, when we say corporate entrepreneurship process, this includes three processes. First is the strategic renewal. Next is innovation, which refers to generation of new information or ideas. And lastly, corporate venturing, wherein expansion of new ideas regardless of what is already existing to an organization or company. And when we manage to have these three processes together, we can now have what we call corporate entrepreneurship. When we say corporate entrepreneurship, this is a process by which teams within an established company conceive, foster, launch, and manage a new business that is distinct from the parent company but leverages the parent assets, market position, capabilities, or other resources. So basically, entrepreneurship and corporate entrepreneurship are somehow the same in some ways. Wherein when we say corporate entrepreneurship, this refers to process by which aims to, generate new ideas and information, but still maintaining what is existing to a company or parent company. Specifically, it's leverages the parent's assets, market position, capabilities, and other significant resources. Why should we corporate entrepreneurship? Corporate entrepreneurship will help a company to avoid some of these negative factors or hindrance for a company to achieve what is it trying to achieve. First is corporate entrepreneurship might help in avoiding major barriers. It could also help in minimizing the reliance on past or even the per execution. It could also help a company to foresee business benefits and also accelerate growth. Corporate entrepreneurship can also help to, avoid the inability to change. It could also provide few role models, and also it helps in it helps a company to avoid lack of capabilities, failure failure rate, or even the inadequate growth. International strategy. When we say international strategy, this is commonly divided into four major strategical approach, which are the standardization strategy, which has the high rate of global integration but has a low rate of local responsiveness. Transnational strategy, which has both high global integration and local responsiveness. Next is export strategy that has both low global integration and local responsiveness. Last is the multi-domestic strategy, which has a high local responsiveness but low when it comes to global integration. When we say international strategy, multinational firms are constantly faced with many important decisions. This includes entry strategies, the dilemma of choosing between local adaptation in product offerings, location, advertising and pricing, and global integration and others. This lesson will discuss how firm firms create value and achieve competitive advantage in the global marketplace. It will address how firms can avoid pitfalls by developing a better understanding on business environment of different countries and the factors that can influence a nation's success in a particular industry. So basically, when we say international strategy, this provides company or even a specific country a platform to have a international influence, not just local adaptation, but could also give global integration in which might help in pursuing international market share or even international campaigns that might give huge potential to the company or even to the country itself. Managers may face many opportunities and risks when they diversify abroad. The trade among nations has increased dramatically in recent years and is estimated that recently the trade across nations exceeded the trade within nations in a variety of industries such as semiconductors, automobiles, commercial aircraft, telecommunication, computers, and consumer electronics. It is almost impossible to survive unless firms scans the world for competitors, customers, human resources, suppliers, and technology. So basically, I this gives us examples in which might have the biggest risk when it comes to diversifying abroad, specifically the business in the field of technology and innovation. Wherein businesses that are inclined in the field of technology and business technology and innovations are having a continuous upgrades or even continuous generating of ideas in which might could also serves as a threat for this kind of business in which a lot of um a lot of competitors are also offering products or even campaigns that is giving or that is adding difficulties in the international competition. And now let's move forward to the key points that must be taken when incorporating entrepreneurship. So basically, we have to take note on this since if we're planning to take incorporating entrepreneurship, this might help us to achieve it. First is we must create an environment of empowerment, wherein for us, in order to create an environment of empowerment, we has we have to learn each individual's strength, then play to them. We also have to give power to those people who have demonstrated they are ready for more responsibility, and also giving people discretion of their own decision and resources. We, we should also provide opportunities for training and education to help people grow, and also we must not don't we must not second guess people. Lastly, reward people for tackling problems and advancing the company's interests. We must also learn how to communicate, in order to communicate to our employee or to the personnel inside the company or organization, we must share information freely, or we must implement that information sharing are highly recommended. Next is we we must make sure on informations that it it would always flows up and down. And lastly, encouraging people to openly ask questions about how to make things better. Next is we also have to value the entrepreneurial approach and continuous effort, wherein in order to value entrepreneurial approach, we must communicate with our people about the values that serves as a guiding principles that support every decision that company makes, that an entrepreneurial approach is valued encouraged, and rewarded. Remember that the company values don't need to be complicated or even original. The important point is that they are sincere. And last is continuous effort. When we're in continuous effort, this refers to fostering an entrepreneurial culture which requires continuous effort. Make sure your entrepreneurial vision is part of your senior management discussions. It should also be a topic for discussion with the managers' performance discussion with their teams. Again, the entrepreneurial culture must be cultivated. It is the result of concerted effort by the company to drive innovation, productivity, and success. Lastly, these are the critical steps of a corporate entrepreneurial strategy. First is develop the vision and mission. Of course, when we are planning the corporate entrepreneurial strategy, we must have something that serves as a guidance or something that serves as a goal for our company. We're in developing the vision and mission might give a specific type of goals that is that is needed to be achieved. Next step is encouraging innovation, especially when we say entrepreneurial strategy. This talks about generating the generation of new ideas, wherein when we encourage innovation, it could serves us huge potential in making new ideas and information that may also serve as a potential for the company. Third step is structuring for entrepreneurial climate, then followed by developing individual manners for corporate entrepreneurship. And lastly, developing venture team. If we manage to follow these steps accordingly and effectively, it would give us the assurance to have a successful corporate entrepreneurial strategy, and will also guarantee the effectivity of this strategy. Thank you for listening. That's all for my topic.